The Midnight Train, Part 3 The Weeping Bride and the Man with the Briefcase. My name is Amy, or at least I call myself Amy now. I'm still trapped on the midnight train, but I managed to stay alive until now. The detective had told me that the train doesn't like it when passengers hide away in their compartments, so I had no choice but to seek out the company of other passengers. Also, I promised you last time I would visit the weeping woman on the balcony, and that's exactly what I did. My breakfast was as terrible as yesterday, again with crackers and chocolate and cola. Right after that, I began my journey to the end of the train where the woman was supposed to be. I heard the children in compartment 18 scream again as I passed, but I simply ignored them. There surely was a way to release vengeful spirits from their torment, but I wouldn't bother with some sort of exorcism. I was here to survive, not to make the train angry at me. Reaching the end of the train wasn't a problem. It took a while, but not long enough to make me wonder whether or not the train extended itself. I walked without hurry until I reached the final door. I paused before opening it. I had no idea what to expect when I stepped outside because there was nothing to see outside the windows. Maybe I could at least see the tracks. I might be dumb, but I was a little scared to go out. Still, I took a deep breath, grabbed the handle, and pushed the door open. Are you familiar with Lovecraft's works? More specifically, the music of Eric Zahn? If so, you will understand why there's not really a way to describe what I saw. But for those of you who don't know his short stories, I will attempt to explain. Imagine every possible color, every single one. Now try to imagine them burning against pitch black darkness while not being visible at all. Imagine impossible shapes swirling endlessly. Imagine black stars against a black sky burning bright enough to almost blind you. Imagine the physical form of insanity. I only looked at this for a second before I focused on the weeping woman because I was afraid I'd lose my mind if I looked at it any longer than that. It was still enough to burn the image into my mind, and yet I have a hard time recalling it, like a faded memory just too far away to grasp. The woman was young, mid-20s maybe. She wore a white wedding dress and a veil. Her hair was long and blonde, and she covered her face with her hands while she was crying. Hey, I greeted her. She didn't react. I'm Amy. Still no reaction. I sat down on the floor, back against the railing, so I faced the door and didn't stare into the maddening abyss. I had expected her to be the last terrifying option, but whatever happened out there made it hard to breathe whenever I glanced at it. I closed my eyes for a while. You don't talk, right? I asked the weeping bride. Does it bother you if I talk? She was silently sobbing now, though I took that as a no. The train doesn't let me hide, and you're supposed to be one of the nicer people here, I explained to her. You don't look at this outside thing, do you? I feel nauseous already. No reaction. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but this wedding dress and all, you lost someone, didn't you? Your husband? She was wailing now. Her dress rustled as she was shaking violently. Yeah, I know. I blindly reached out and petted the soft fabric of her dress. I lost someone too. She made a noise that almost sounded like a question. It was my dad. I answered the unspoken question. He committed suicide 2 years ago. I told her that because it seemed to get a reaction out of her, not so much that she would say something, if she was even capable of talking, but her weeping was reduced to a silent sobbing as I talked. He hung himself, I continued. My parents were divorced and he lived alone. He had been dead for hours when they found him. Clinical depression. He'd apparently gone to a therapist and she dismissed him. Didn't recognize the signs for some reason. Talking about it was still hard. The words just didn't want to come out. Each of them tasted stale on my tongue. Those of you who had to recount a trauma might be familiar with the itch deep under your skin, gnawing on your bones where you can't scratch it. The invisible rope around your throat that tries to suffocate you to keep the words from flowing. This kind of very specific nausea deep inside your guts. That's how I experienced it, at least. I kept talking. We sued her, and we won. Got a lot of money. Mom bought a house, a nice house. I laughed bitterly. I hate the damn thing. It reminds me of what happened, and I can't stand it. I don't want a house or money. The therapist lost her job, and I guess you could call it justice, but my dad is still gone. I just want him back. There was movement, and I opened my eyes to see the weeping bride sat down beside me. She was still crying, still covering her face with her hands, but she sat next to me, and our arms were touching. I know, I said. Mom and I cried for weeks, slept on the sofa together. I can't imagine going through all of this all alone. We sat together for several minutes and cried our eyes out. Maybe the detective was right. The midnight train attracts tragedies. So that's it. That's the reason why the story of Compartment 18 made me so sick. I'm sorry if that was hard to read. Anyways, I had hoped for some sort of reaction from the weeping bride, but she merely sat next to me and didn't do anything. As I had calmed down again, I stood up and sadly said goodbye to the bride before I went back inside the train. I went inside the first bathroom I came across to wash the tears from my face. My reflection looked at me through red eyes with red cheeks, so I splashed cool water on my face until I looked better again. I fixed my hair, straightened my jacket, and tried to catch my breath as I noticed something flowing out of the cabinet behind me. Blood, of course. Several liters of dark red blood spilling all over the bathroom floor. I stumbled backwards until my back hit the sink to get away from the dark liquid. I remembered the rule, the one about not trying to save the dead girl in the toilet cabin. But the rules were still vague as shit and didn't specify what the correct reaction was. To be honest, I half expected the door to open and reveal a flood of blood, the Shining style. I did the only thing that seemed logical. I ran out of the bathroom before anything else could happen. I got away from the bathroom door, ran almost to the end of the wagon, and leaned against the window. A trail of bloody footprints was left on the carpet, but they were already fading as if the train was absorbing it. What's your damn problem? I asked the train angrily. I went outside. Didn't I? I didn't get an answer, not that I expected one. Maybe it had been really stupid to scream at the train, but honestly, this thing had no reason to treat me that way. I tried my best, okay? I walked through the wagons back towards my compartment because I certainly had seen enough for that day, but about halfway there, I ran into Lily. Hey, Amy, she greeted me with a bright smile. How are you? I'm fine, I guess. I shrugged. Just talked to the weeping bride. Oh, she's a great listener, right? The poor thing. Nobody knows what happened to her. I mean, she obviously lost someone, but no one knows the details. I had hoped that Lily would know something about her because she had known the story of Compartment 18, and I just assumed that she knew a lot of stories about this train since she's been here for a while. On the other hand, did I really want to hear more horror stories? I planned to return to my compartment. Socializing for the day was done. The train couldn't expect me to run around the whole day, and I just wanted to lie down for a bit. Yes, I had managed to sleep last night. No, it had not been relaxing. I had woken up every few hours, suffered from nightmares about dead children and about blood covered hunters and their skinned dogs that hunted me through eerily silent trains. Now there was Lily, and what can I say except she looked stunning? Her red hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a sundress with a flower pattern and a knitted white jacket, and she looked like a ray of sunshine in this nightmare world. Anyways, this stunningly beautiful woman was standing in front of me and smiled at me, and maybe I could forget my current situation for just a couple of minutes. So I asked her if she wanted to hang out with me for a while. She agreed. Of course, she agreed. She led us to a wagon that was almost empty where we sat down next to a window. I won't go into detail about our conversation because honestly, it's not important. Small talk mostly. I learned that she's been here for 4 years now, and we talked about life before the train, not family. That topic would hurt too much. We talked about music, our favorite movies, childhood, and school. I felt almost relaxed while I was with her. We sat for hours until we both were hungry, and I got up to fetch us something from the vending machines. Sounds simple, right? You know me, I wouldn't mention it if it had been as trivial as one might think. I was standing in front of the vending machines trying to decide what to get for Lily when suddenly someone talked to me. Good evening, the stranger greeted me politely. I looked up, and next to me stood a tall man. He was bald and had pale blue eyes. He wore a three-piece suit and black coat, and in his right hand he carried a briefcase. His age was impossible to determine, something between 30 and 60, I guess. The man with the briefcase, the one the rules had warned me about. I forced myself to smile as I looked up to him. Oh, hello. Good evening, sir. I'm Amy. He chuckled at that, and I couldn't tell if it was something bad. A new face, then. When did you arrive here, Amy? 2 nights ago, I answered honestly, even though I was pretty sure he already knew. I stood perfectly still in front of the vending machines, hands clutched in my jacket, and breathing shallow. He nodded. How do you like the midnight train, Amy? He was definitely mocking me with that name right now. Not that I would call him out on this. I'd like to live, after all. I'm still getting used to it. I didn't lie, not outright at least. I recognize the double edged sword when I see one, and therefore I wouldn't lie to him, but I wouldn't offend him either. It's rather unusual, but I've met a few nice people, and the interior is beautiful. The man with the briefcase nodded again, stared at me with his pale eyes, and said nothing for several seconds. I was still frozen in place, dug my fingers deep into my palms, and barely dared to breathe. Maybe he would kill me right then and there because something about my words had been wrong, because I had somehow managed to offend him, because he simply wanted to, and creatures like him just did things like that sometimes. He didn't kill me, of course. How would I type this if he had? You're scared, he simply stated. Somehow I felt guilty for this. I'm sorry, I still getting used to this, I wanted to repeat. He interrupted me. Good. Familiarity breeds recklessness. Fear will keep you alive. Remember that. I will. I nodded quickly. Thank you, sir. I did not ask him for his name. He knew that Amy wasn't my real name. I was sure about that. So he wouldn't answer me anyways, just like the detective. Goodbye, Amy. He looked at me for a moment with something that was almost a smile, then he turned away and left me alone again. Still, I didn't move as I watched him walk down the hallway. A man was walking in the opposite direction, and he looked painfully human. Around 40 years old, graying hair and dark bags under his eyes, pale and obviously sleep deprived. Maybe he was new, just like me. He bumped into the man with the briefcase, looked up for a moment, and then hissed, "Watch out, old man," before continuing his way in my direction. The man with the briefcase said nothing, just looked at him for a few minutes with an ice cold expression on his face. The glare wasn't meant for me, but I still shivered under the intense gaze. They found the tired man's body a few hours later. I haven't seen it, luckily. Lily told me, pale and trembling and tears in his big brown eyes. Apparently, his throat and wrist had been cut open and he was almost completely bled out. I'm scared for my life again. I don't think the tired man was a bad person. He just hadn't slept and had been scared enough this train was terrifying, and he most likely hadn't had a list of rules like I do. Just one moment where he'd let his anger get the better of him, and now he was dead. That could have been me. If I didn't know the rules by heart now, my head hurts. Lily stayed in my compartment for half of the night because the incident scared her too. Not for her own life, but for mine. She had seen me talking to the man with the briefcase, and now she's worried something might happen to me. She's such a sweetheart. It breaks my heart that she's trapped here. I managed to sleep a little again, still plagued by nightmares, but it's better than nothing. That's it, I guess. I just thought I'd update you guys because I fear the next post will have a lot more content. There has just been an announcement that the train will reach a village in a few hours, and we're allowed to go out and explore. Lily asked me if I want to go with her, get a bit of fresh air. I'm not sure if I want to go out with whatever nightmare the midnight train reaches, but I don't feel comfortable with letting Lily go alone, and the train doesn't want me to hide, right? I'm afraid my fingers tremble a little as I'm writing this, but I still believe that I can survive. I know the rules. I talked to the man with the briefcase, and I'm still alive. I'll update you again as soon as I return from the village. I hope it won't be too bad. Until then, be polite to anyone you meet. It could be a matter of life and death.